Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier, and thank you for stopping by. My home thoughts, I rather like this photograph of Times Square in New York on January the 26th, 2015. I think it just escaped the blizzard, but it's our summer here. It's very warm, so it made me yearn for the cold, I must say. I came across Mao Zedong again. Women hold up half the sky, he said. And I should know, living in a completely female household, a wife, 3 daughters, and Sahara, the golden retriever. And then this quote as well: it's always darkest before it becomes totally black. Mao Zedong. Global Post tweeted, this is how the Islamic State was halted in Kobani. Nicolas Sal at Nicolas Sal at CBC. It was deeply emotional to feel the atmosphere of free Kobani. A man walks past, this is from Reuters, a man walks past screens displaying a television news program showing an image of Kenji Goto, one of 2 Japanese citizens taken captive by the Islamic State on January the 25th. In societies reduced to blur and glut, terror is the only meaningful act. There's too much everything, more things and messages and meanings than we can use in 10,000 lifetimes. Inertia, hysteria, is history possible? Is anyone serious? What do we take serious? Only the lethal believer, the person who kills and dies for faith. Everyone else is absorbed. The artist is absorbed. The madman in the street is absorbed and processed and incorporated. Give him $1, put him in a TV commercial. Only the terrorists stand outside. The culture hasn't figured out how to assimilate him. It's confusing when they kill the innocent. Goto is a classic example, but this is precisely the language of being noticed, the only language the West understands, the way they determine how we see them, the way they dominate the rush of endless streaming images. Dr. Leela, of course, but I think he has a point which applies to this whole hostage-taking media circus. Ebola crisis, world dangerously unprepared for future pandemics. The president of the World Bank has warned that the world is dangerously unprepared for future deadly pandemics like the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. Jim Yong Kim, speaking in Washington, said it was vital that governments, corporations, aid agencies, insurance companies work together to prepare for future outbreaks. Take you back to Joshua Lederberg, who said the single biggest threat to man's continued dominance on this planet is the virus. And it's good news that the Ebola virus has substantially been in remission. That's fantastic, but you know the threat lies there. It's mathematical, it's exponential. And why it tapered off at 20,000 and why not 200,000 is credit to everybody, but also I think speaks to the threat of this kind of thing. Variagi tweeted, Barack Obama arrives for friendly chit-chat with new Saudi king. The rest of that tweet was just in time for a beheading, but I like the Twitter pic. And then Politico tweeted, Riyadh today. This is a photograph taken by Getty, which also got my attention. Bloomberg View, King Salman, just 5 days in, Saudi Arabia's new king has already overseen a beheading. On that note, Sussex Mark tweeted, Saudi arrests man who filmed police beheading woman in street. Then there is a scandal saying Saudis say Michelle Obama was not blurred on TV. This was a report in Bloomberg View. I'll put up that photograph that they've put, which is arrival in Riyadh. And photographer Saul Loeb. In that report, they're saying basically that the Saudi king greeted the president, but avoided greeting Michelle Obama. And have a look at the photograph, you can see On the January 23rd, the Financial Times headlined, Russian banker warns West over SWIFT. You will remember that Iran was cut off from SWIFT. And this is the kind of thing, this is the oil and financial warfare which the President has deployed so effectively in Iran to begin with. I think that was the test case, and now Russia. But, the alarm with which the Russians must be feeling, worrying about being cut off from SWIFT, is expressed in this. Addressing Davos Economic Forum participants, calling exclusion from the international banking payment system tantamount to war. Russia's banks rely heavily on the Belgium-based payment system for both domestic and international payments. One advisor calls excluding them the nuclear option. VTB is Russia's second largest bank. CEO Andrei Kostin was blunt, saying, "If there is no SWIFT, there is no banking relationship. It means that the countries are on the verge of war, or they are definitely in a Cold War that they're in already." The next day, the Russians and American ambassadors would have to leave the capitals. Defeating Islamic State means a deal with Assad, says Bloomberg View, and I've got in parentheses, should have been obvious from 2011. The Kurdish flags now fluttering over Kobani after 4 months of fighting demonstrate that Islamic State can be beaten on the battlefield in Syria. Plentiful US air power, some 750 airstrikes, combined with determined allies on the ground, can get the job done. That's less encouraging than it might be, though, and not just because success in Kobani will be hard to replicate elsewhere. To truly end the fighting in Syria and defeat Islamic State, the US and its allies will have to undertake the distasteful but necessary task of negotiating with Syrian President and war criminal Bashar al-Assad, they say. This conclusion should have been made in 2011. India is now the belle of the ball, as most of the world and regional powers make pilgrimages to New Delhi to flatter and flirt with India's dynamic Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, says Asia Times. Euro is around the 113.40 level. It rose to 114.23 on Tuesday, extending its rebound from an 11-year low 100.98 hit on Monday. But I think it's still going to parity. Dollar index 94.14, I'll come to that in a moment. Dollar yen 118.04, Swissy 0.9051. And the euro has been rebounding against the Swissy. Pound 151.86, Aussie above 0.80 at 0.8002. India rupee 61.383, South Korean won 10.8460. Rial 257.24, Egyptian pound 743.95. You will recall it stayed for eternity at 7.15, but has been devalued quite sharply recently. South African rand 11.5613. Dollar index, I'll put up a 3-month chart. My target remains 100. However, it did post its biggest fall since early October on Tuesday, to trade as low as 94.10, having hit an 11-year high of 95.481 on Friday. I remain extremely bullish about the dollar. Obviously, we'll have trading days when the reverse occurs like it did yesterday. I remember Howard, who used to be my futures broker, telling me that Tuesdays was a contrarian day in the context of a trend, and how right that was. Euro dollar, as I said, 113.40. My target's one. Commodity markets, crude oil, $45.57. Below 40 is inevitable now. Gold, 12.9210. I think the squeeze higher on a safe haven bid is running out of breath. Foreign airlines cancelled flights to Baghdad after a Fly Dubai jet was hit by suspected sniper fire during landing. And then someone tweeted a photograph of the chair inside the plane, clearly hit. Lagarde warns African economies of headwinds from China. Lagarde called for vigilance across Africa and added this slower growth has implications for a continent that is now more integrated into the global economy than ever before. Momentum is slowing in many advanced and emerging economies, including China, one of Africa's main trading partners, Lagarde told Rwandan lawmakers in the capital, Kigali. Lagarde said the overall outlook for sub-Saharan Africa was promising at close to 5%, but growth forecasts for the region have been trimmed due to lower oil and commodity prices. African countries such as Nigeria and South Sudan depend on oil for the majority of their revenues. Lagarde said some African oil exporters will struggle in case oil prices remain low and warned of instability once the United States starts imminent monetary policy normalization. Even if this process is well managed and well communicated, she said, I believe that it has been and will be, there could be negative effects for emerging markets and global financial stability. African economies could also be impacted, she said. And of course she was a guest at Mind Speaking. What a tremendous guest she was. I'm a great admirer of her, I must admit. She's extremely bright, and she's quite right in that description. Surge in dollar debt leaves some African nations exposed as a think tank. Judith Tyson, senior researcher at the Overseas Development Institute, said the notional losses in terms of higher interest and capital repayments could total $11 billion in the event of a slump of 35% in African currencies against the dollar, something that Ghana nearly managed. She's saying Ivory Coast could be the most exposed, risking losses equivalent to some 11% of its GDP due to its high debt, long maturities. We are calling for caution, she said. Sub-Saharan Africa has the potential to repeat the problems which occurred in the early 1990s in Asia and Latin America, where damaging financial crises pushed millions back into poverty for a decade. Foreign debt issues to Sub-Saharan Africa last year exceeded $6.25 billion, of which we did $2.75 billion, bringing the stock of debt to over $18 billion. That remains small relative to regional GDP measured by the World Bank at more than $1.6 trillion. But some countries are more exposed. Ghana, overall debt to GDP, 65%. And most of it, they've just spent on recurrent expenditure. Senegal and Mozambique both have more than 50%. Normalizing of Western interest rates risks sucking capital from African markets. Tyson said irresponsible use of debt by some countries was adding to the problem, as many had raised on international markets, money raised on international markets not being used for investment that would boost future economic growth. She said Mozambique had borrowed $850 million for its national fishing industry, but instead spent the money on military boats. This is the tuna boat saga. I actually tried to buy those bonds when this news first broke, because the bonds then flipped over 10%. And my theory was that actually, the credit of Mozambique was very strong, and bondholders would get over it. Ghana also spent heavily on hefty public sector pay increases, resulting in a wide fiscal deficit, prompting it to open talks on an IMF program. Sudan's Omar al-Bashir has got a Chinese-built presidential palace, built a brand new, vast palace right next door. 26 January is its grand official opening. The date is unlikely to be a coincidence. In recent years, they've built similar structures in Angola, Burundi, Guinea-Bissau, Lesotho, Malawi, Mozambique, Sierra Leone, and Togo. The list could go on. You could call it soft diplomacy, or perhaps concrete diplomacy. South African all-share bounced 0.74% high yesterday, up 1.97% year-to-date. And I said, sentiment changed dramatically once the QE program was announced. Dollar rand softening up here, 11.5562. Egyptian pound soft, 7.4426. It's a managed move lower. Egyptian stock market up another 1.14% yesterday, 50 points off 10,000, up 11.47% year to date. Nigeria will, and obviously Africa's best, Nigeria will not delay elections, as the Commission. Head of Nigeria's Electoral Commission said on Tuesday the country will hold a presidential election as scheduled on Feb 14, rejecting a call from one of the president's advisors to delay them. We remain committed to implementing the timetable, Commission head Atahiru Jaga told a news conference. Now listen to this. The elections will be the first where Nigeria's 68.8 million voters must have biometric cards, a measure introduced to guard against fraud that had plagued previous polls. But delays in getting the cards out to voters, there is no functioning postal service in Nigeria, have cast doubts over whether the deadline can be met. There are systemic challenges affecting distribution. Nigeria is not a country where you can mail cards. There is no guarantee it will reach its destination. Put up a photograph of the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Atahiru Jaga. Nigerian all-share worst performing index in the world, down 13.84% this year. Nigeria may stop foreign currency sales for local goods imports, considering halting sales of dollars to import goods that are already manufactured in the country, as it seeks to reduce pressure on the local currency hit by a drop in oil prices. The only thing that will reduce pressure on our currency is by producing those things we are importing today. This is the Central Bank of Nigeria Governor Godwin Emefiele. We will try as much as possible not to hurt your business, but we need to be able to work together. The Naira has slumped 16% against the dollar on the interbank market in the past 6 months. That's the most among 24 countries tracked by Bloomberg. Ghana stock exchange down 4.29% year to date. White farmers to meet Zimbabwe government over land seizures, is reported Bloomberg. Zimbabwe's Commercial Farmers Union, which represents mainly white farmers, will meet with Lands and Resettlement Minister Douglas Mombishora to discuss the government's plans to evict whites still growing crops. We've managed to secure a meeting with Minister Mombishora tomorrow to seek clarification on whether the government still wants us to farm in the country. The government on January the 22nd gave white crop farmers 90 days to leave their land. It gave an exemption to dairy farmers and livestock breeders. This photograph caught my attention. Abandoned sandals in the bush in Burundi, January 2015, from the BBC. This was found near the site of an alleged mass grave. Going back to my piece that I wrote over the weekend, Kenyan asset markets had been displaying a lot of alpha. The main thrust of my point was, as an importer of petroleum, which we are, sharply reduced price will provide a significant stimulus to our economy. It is very grassroots because everyone buys fuel. This, combined with lower food prices, oil is a leader in this regard, will juice the economy meaningfully. The Jubilee government will owe a big vote of thanks to President US Barack Obama, the 21st century oil war specialist, for wrestling the price below $50 a barrel. Because these are exactly the right ingredients for creating the feel-good factor. Money sent home by Kenyans living abroad rose 10.68% last year to $1.43 billion, which is a record. Kenya shilling last trading 91.763. All share ticked 0.13% high yesterday. It's up 1.8% so far this year. NSE 20 is up 1.9% so far this year. Mumia Sugar, best performing share at the stock market, up 51.28% this year. Share data is on rich wrap-ups. Kenya Airways up 24.71% as it plays catch-up with a worldwide airline rally. EABL up 2.72% this year, and that for me is really an optimal trade. I think it goes to 400 to get some dividends, and it's going to be a very steady rise up there with 300 as a stop loss. UAP is the second most valued insurer post the Old Mutual deal. Sale of stakes in UAP holdings to Old Mutual by key shareholders has valued the OTC stock at 38 billion shillings, catapulting it into second place after Britam. Britam is the most valued among the listed insurance firms with a market cap of 57.66 billion shillings. Jubilee 27.5 billion shillings. In terms of assets, Jubilee led the listed firms in the first half year to June at 68.9 billion, Britam 55.15 billion, Liberty 31.8 billion, Kenya re 29.8 billion. Red hot sector array, lots of interest. It's just the latest example of it. Once again, thank you for stopping by.